right, my friends, in today's lesson, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about jazz piano chord voicings. Now, you might be thinking, Johnny, what is a chord voicing? Well, a chord voicing is simply all of the ways that you can play a chord in the jazz piano style. And there are 6 essential jazz chord voicings that you really need to know if you want to play jazz piano. So in today's lesson, I'm not only going to show you these chord voicings, but also how to apply them to any jazz tune. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so for this lesson, we're going to use the classic jazz tune Autumn Leaves. I'm briefly going to go over the chords and the melody just for the A section, and then we're going to use these chords and this melody to demonstrate the various chord voicings that you can use to play this tune. Okay? So the tune is in the key of E minor, right? First chord, A minor 7. Second chord is a D7. These are all the basic chords that you would see in a lead sheet if you played the tune. There's our G major 7. We have like a C major 7. F sharp minor 7, flat 5. Then we have a little B7. And then we end on our E minor 7. Okay? So these are kind of the standard chords from Autumn Leaves, and then you would repeat this section. Alright, before I teach you voicing technique number 1, if you're enjoying this lesson, please hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. Alright, now that you've learned the basic chords, now you can actually voice the chords in an interesting way. So before I teach you voicing technique number 1, let's talk about what a voicing is. And you know, the first chord in Autumn Leaves is this A minor 7 chord. Well, a voicing is basically how to take the notes from this chord and distribute them on the piano. For example, I can play the chord like this, or I could play it like that, right? And it's a very different sound. Or I can play it like that, right? Or I can play it like that. So a voicing refers to the texture of a chord. You can have an A minor 7 chord with a very thin chord texture, or you can play the same chord with a very thick chord texture. A voicing could also refer to the notes that you add to a chord like an A minor 7. For example, you could play the A minor 7 with all the standard notes, or you could add the 9, or you could add the 11, all right? So these are all different voicings of an A minor 7 chord. There's my A minor 9, here's my A minor 11, and so there's lots of different notes that you can add to chords to create different voicings. Alright, let's talk about voicing number 1 technique. This is the simplest technique, so if you're a little more on the beginner side of playing jazz piano, this is the technique for you. So I'm going to play what it sounds like, and then I'm going to break down this voicing. It's actually a really simple technique. So what am I playing? Well, these are called chord shells, and a chord shell is like a partial chord, meaning we're not going to play all of the notes from the chord. Instead, we're only going to play 2 notes from the chord, so they're really easy to play. Now, there are 2 options for chord shells. The first option is to play just the root and the 7th of the chord, okay? And I tend to put it down here. Really nice sound. And then the second option is to play the root and the 3rd of the chord, okay? So root 7 and root 3rd chord shells. So how do you apply this idea to the tune Autumn Leaves? Well, it's actually really simple. We have our lead in line, and instead of our big A minor 7 chord, we just play the root and the 7th down below. And it sounds great. That sound beautiful? And then here's the really cool thing. On the D7 chord, if you just go to the root and the 3rd, it's really close by. You see that? There's the D7 right there. Then we go to our G major 7. Well, check it out. The root and the 7 are right here. So it's a really easy way to maneuver between chords because each chord is going to be really close to the next chord. Now notice that we're following this root 7 pattern to a root 3rd pattern as we progress through the chords, okay? So chord shells almost always will follow root 3rd, root 7, root third, root 7 if you're following a progression like the one in Autumn Leaves, which is called a cycle of fifths chord progression. Now, if you want to master your chord shells, check out our course, Chord Shells and Guide Tone Exercises. In this course, you can master all of your chord shells for all of your keys and play them in a bunch of different ways, so I'll put a link to that below. All right, voicing technique number 2 is called the guide tone technique, and it sounds like this. So what the heck am I playing? Well, these are called guide tones, and they're actually really simple to play. So what's a guide tone? Well, if you take the first chord, which is A minor 7, there are 2 notes in this chord that are the most important notes. The notes are the 3rd and the 7th of the chord, and we call these the guide tones because they guide the chord from one to the next, okay? So there are basically 2 ways to play the guide tones in your left hand. Option 1 is to play the 3rd and the 7th of the chord. So we play it like this. And option 2 are to invert those notes. So to take the 7th and put it on the bottom and play it like this. And you'll really appreciate this chord if you jump from the root up to the guide tones, right? So that's option 1, and then option 2 is going to be there. Now, one way to remember each of these voicing techniques is to remember the rule behind the technique. And here in the lesson sheet music on the top left of your screen, you might notice the rule for guide tones. Well, it's pretty simple. The rule for guide tones is to play only 2 notes from the chord, which is the 3rd and the 7th, or the 7th and the 3rd. So how do we actually apply guide tones to Autumn Leaves? Well, it's pretty simple. There are basically 2 ways to play guide tones. The first way I'm going to show you is the easier way, and that is if you're playing with a band or a bass player who's laying down the bass or the root note. In this case, you do not need to play the bass note, but you can simply play the guide tone. All right, so what exactly am I playing? Well, you have the lead in line on your melody. First chord is A minor 7. So for this chord, we're going to play the guide tones, which are the 7th and the 3rd of the chord. And if you're not sure how to figure out your guide tones, just go back to your original chord. There's the 3rd and the 7th. And then I'm just playing the second option where I invert the chord down. Okay? So we have then the D7. It's right there. Isn't that cool? So between these chords, I only have to move 1 note. And this is the beauty of guide tones, is that oftentimes you only have to move 1 note between the chords, and so it's a very efficient way of moving in between the chords. Okay, so we have guide tones, G major 7, there's the guide tones, right? The 7th and the 3rd of the chord. Again, if this does not pop out at you as the guide tones, just play the original chord and you'll see the 3rd and the 7. Okay, so G major 7 to the C major 7. There's the 3 and the 7 of the chord. There's the 3 and the 7, or the 7 and the 3 of the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord. There's the B7, and then the 3 and the 7 of the E minor 7 chord. Now, I put a note down here that you'll use this approach if you're playing with a bass player, but you can use this approach if you're playing solo piano. The trick for this is you'll want to play the root and then jump up to the guide tone. Okay, so if you want to play it like this, you can do it, but you got to jump to the chord tones. Does that make sense? By the way, if you want to do a deep dive on guide tones, you want to learn how to use them in tunes, check out our course, Play Lead Sheets with Shells and Guide Tones. In this course, I show you how to use both shells and guide tones on 8 of the most common chord progressions in jazz music, so I'll put a link to that below. All right, voicing technique number 3 is what I think to be the coolest voicing in jazz piano, and it sounds like this. All All right, so what the heck am I playing? Well, now I'm using some really cool chords in the left hand called rootless voicing chords, okay? And here's how a rootless voicing chord works. If you take your first chord, which is an A minor 7, what you want to do is you want to get rid of the root. Okay, so we call this a rootless voicing. There's no root. And instead of playing the root, we're going to substitute it for the note just a whole step above the root, the B, which we call the 9 in jazz. And we call it the 9 because we're stacking thirds up from the root. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So we get rid of the root and we play the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th. And this is the first rootless voicing, 3, 5, 7, 9. Now there's an alternate way that you can play this rootless voicing, and that is to put the 7th on the bottom. So we take that G and we put it down here, and we take the B and we put it down there as well, okay? And now we have a really cool kind of crunchy sounding A minor 7 chord. So the rule for rootless voicing chords is written right here. You want to substitute the 9 for the root in your chords whenever possible. By the way, I wanted to mention that the lesson sheet music you're seeing up here on the top left of the screen is downloadable and printable. You can also change the key of this entire lesson with the click of one button with our smart sheet music. Plus, this lesson comes with 6 downloadable backing tracks, and I'll put a link to all of that below. So how do we apply our rootless voicing chords to Autumn Leaves? Well, we're going to bring the melody up the octave to give some room for our rootless voicing chords. There's our first chord, A minor 7. Ooh, there's our D7 chord. Isn't that cool? So we're just dropping that G down to an F sharp. And if you're curious where we get this chord from, it comes from a D7. We get rid of the root, we put the 9 in there, and there's one other little thing we do on our rootless voicing chords for dominant chords. We get rid of the 5th and we put in what's called the 13, okay? Don't worry if this is confusing for you. It will make sense over time as you're exposed to these chords, okay? There's our beautiful G major chord. And again, this comes from a G major 7. Get rid of the root, put the 9 in there, and we're gonna invert the notes down, okay? So, and then the C major 7, there it is, right? 3, 5, 7, and 9. Here's our lead in line. Next chord, F sharp minor 7, flat 5. There it is. And for this chord, we're actually going to break our rule, and we are going to play the root in this chord. And you might be wondering, Johnny, why don't we play the 9? Well, I actually just don't like the sound of the 9 on a minor 7 flat 5 chord, okay? So this is one of the exception chords. When I'm playing a minor 7 flat 5 chord or a half diminished chord, I do play the root in the chord. It kind of stabilizes the chord a little bit, okay? Next one. Ooh, very cool B7 chord. And again, it's very close by, right? And this comes from our B7. Get rid of the root, put the 9 in, substitute the 5th for the 13, okay? And then we land on our E minor 7 chord, and again, play the rootless voicing like this. Okay, there's a couple little tips for playing your rootless voicings. If you're playing with a band, all you need to do is play the chords because you have a bass player playing all the roots. But if you're playing solo piano, then I recommend that you jump from the root up to the rootless voicing chord. Does that make sense? Another really fun thing to do with rootless voicing chords is to play what I call the big band sound. This was a style of piano played by jazz pianist Red Garland, and he was basically using rootless voicings in his left hand. But in the right hand, he'd play these big octaves on the melody, and then he'd oftentimes add a chord tone in the middle of the melody. So if you want to play in this sort of Red Garland or big band style, then you'll use the rootless voicings with the big octave melodies in the right hand. By the way, if you want to master your rootless voicing chords, including playing them in all 12 keys, plus how to use them on the most common chord progression in jazz, check out our rootless voicings courses. I'll put a link to those below. All right, voicing technique number 4 is called the block chord technique, and it sounds like this. Doesn't that sound amazing? Now this is a style of piano that was made popular by the pianist George Shearing. So if you want to listen to more tunes in this style, check out George Shearing. So how do you play block chords? Well, it's actually a really simple idea. We're going to take this melody and we're going to play it in octaves. And then we're going to fill that melody with 3 notes in the middle. All right? So now instead of this, we have that. All right? So we're going to look at the first chord in the tune, which is A minor 7. And how do you voice that C melody using a block chord? Well, we're going to make this an octave like this, and then we're going to fill with 3 notes in the middle, and for this we're just going to use the chord tones from an A minor 7 chord. That is a block chord. And it has a very thick kind of texture because we've got the melody here and 3 notes in the middle. So this is a really nice voicing to use if you want kind of that classic jazz sound. So the rule, once again, for block chords, it is a 5-note chord. You've got the octave on the outside plus the 3 notes in the middle. All right, so how do we actually apply this to Autumn Leaves? Well, we start with our lead and melody, and we fill in with the chord tones. So here's our E minor 7. There are the 3 notes in the middle, melody in octaves on the outside. Same notes in the middle. Then our next melody note. Again, we're just playing the chord tones from the chord E minor 7. A minor 7, just using some chord tones in the middle. D7, simple D7 chord. Same notes in the middle, melodies moving up. And then for this one, I like to use the E instead of the D. You could play it like that, but the E is the 9th, and it just sounds a little more interesting. Okay? G major 7. Ooh, this is really nice. Again, melody is the B. For this one, we're going to use our G major 7 chord tones, 5th, 7th, and 9th. And then I like to move these down. Little third movement there, making this a G6 chord. Then our C major 7 chord, or C major 6. They're substitute chords. I turn this into a C6 chord. And we just walk it up. C major 7, put a little movement there from the 6 to the 7. Back to the C6. F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Again, just the melody there. Chord tones in the middle. Okay, it's a beautiful sound on the piano. Okay. B7. Ooh, isn't that nice? Okay, again, we're just walking up the melody there. Chord tones in the middle on a B7. Same chord tones in the middle. And then here's that B7 with the 9. Again, you could just put the root in if you wanted, but I like the 9 a little bit better. And then finally, E minor 7. Again, it's just a simple E minor 7 chord tones in the middle, and then we walk it back up. Same thing as before. By the way, if you want to master your block chords, including learning them in all 12 keys, plus how to play them on the most common chords in jazz, check out our block chords course. I'll put a link to that below. All right, voicing number 5 technique is called the drop 2 voicing technique, and it sounds like this. So what the heck am I playing? Well, it's actually a really simple idea. What I'm doing is I'm taking my block chords that I just taught you, and I'm dropping the second note from the top, the D, down to the bottom. So I'm putting it right there. And the way to think of this is when you have a block chord, the top note is voice number 1. It's like soprano, and then voice 2, alto, right, tenor, baritone, and bass, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're taking the second voice and you're dropping it to the bottom, and therefore we have the drop 2 sound. So you're gonna do this on all of the chords. So first chord, E minor 7, there's the drop 2, right? Same thing. And then for this chord, there's the drop 2. Again, this just comes from the E minor 7, there's the second voice, and it gets dropped down. Okay, A minor 7, there's the drop 2, we're just dropping the A down. D7, we're dropping the C down, voice 2. Melody's moving up. And then for this guy, we're dropping the 9 down, which we played earlier here, and now it's going to the bottom. Okay, G major 7, there's the first starting note, and then the second one, I like to drop the 7 down to the 6. Then our C6 chord, there's the drop 2. We walk this up. There's the 7th drop down. There's the C drop down. There's our F sharp minor 7 flat 5, dropping the F sharp down. B7, dropping the 7 down here. Same thing. And then for the B7, we're going to drop the 9 down there, that C sharp. And then we're going to land on the E minor 7. There's the drop 2, just dropping the E down. And then we repeat the same thing. By the way, if you want to master your drop 2 chords, you can in our drop 2 voicings course. I'll put a link to that below. All right, voicing technique number 6 is the most challenging technique, and this is called the quartal voicing technique, which sounds like this. Alright, so what the heck am I playing? Well, basically for this voicing technique, you're going to build your chords in primarily 4th intervals, okay? So for example, we come in with our melody, ba-da-dum-bum, okay? This melody note C, we're going to play in A minor 7, but we're going to build it in as many 4th intervals as possible. And currently the A minor 7 is primarily built in 3rd intervals. So the way that we do this is we actually turn it into a minor 11 chord, right? This is an A minor 11 chord. And now from here I can build a chord with the C on the top using these notes. Okay, check it out. Here's a 4th down, that's the 7th of the chord. Here's a 4th down, that's the 11. A 4th down, that's the A. A 4th down, that's the E. Right? Isn't that amazing? So we're playing an A minor 7 chord, we're adding the 9 and the 11, and then we're playing 4th intervals down the piano, and you get this really kind of cool modern jazz sound. All right, so how do you actually apply this to Autumn Leaves? Well, 1st chord, E minor 7. We're going to play it as an E minor 11 chord and distribute 4ths down the piano. See, that melody moves up, and then for this guy, we want to redistribute our 4ths, right? E minor 11. If you don't know an E minor 11 chord, there it is, E minor 7, E minor 9, E minor 11, okay? So there's the E minor 7, A minor 11, isn't that beautiful? And then, ooh, isn't that cool? Okay, this is that D7, spread out in primarily 4th intervals. You do have a little 3rd there, that's okay, you can have a 3rd in these chords, you just primarily want 4th intervals. That moves up, there's your 4th, and then, this is a kind of interesting way of playing a D7 chord, but you do achieve a lot of 4ths with this voicing here, okay? G major 6, 9, primarily 4th intervals down the piano. Then the C6 chord, mostly 4th intervals down the piano. This is a C6, 9, 4th intervals. Okay, you do have a 3rd there, that's okay. And then a C6, 9, once again. Ooh, beautiful. F sharp minor 11 with a flat 5, okay? Again, it's just F sharp minor 7, flat 5, and we're adding the 11 to it. Again, getting lots of 4th intervals down the piano. And then the B7, ooh, this is beautiful, right? B7, lots of 4th intervals. And that moves up. And then, same voicing we had on the D chord, but now it's on the B chord, right? And then finally, E minor 7, we're going to play it here, all 4th intervals, and then we walk it back up. By the way, if you want to master your quartal voicings, including learning them in all 12 keys, plus how to use them over the most common chords in jazz, check out our Quartal Voicings Essentials course. I'll put a link to that below. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the lesson, please let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels where you'll learn your favorite songs, styles, and how to improvise at the piano. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.